In the bustling yet financially struggling outskirts of Cebu City, a young poor boy named Ramon stepped onto the America's Got Talent stage with a quiet bravery that most adults could only dream of. His life back home was filled with challenges, days spent helping his mother sell street snacks just to buy rice, nights spent sleeping in a small wooden house that shook whenever the wind grew strong. Yet, despite the weight of poverty pressing on his shoulders, Ramon carried within him a spark, a deep love for music that shaped every corner of his identity. As he walked across the giant stage, his worn-out sandals tapping lightly against the polished floor, the bright studio lights felt overwhelming. Still, he kept moving forward, holding tightly to a borrowed guitar with edges chipped from years of use. It wasn't just an instrument. It was the only thing that kept his dreams alive. Ramon stood there, trembling but determined, facing thousands of eyes and cameras pointed directly at him. For a moment, he felt like the poorest boy in the richest room. But then he reminded himself why he came. This was his chance to lift his family out of hardship, his chance to prove that someone from the streets of Cebu could stand tall on one of the world's biggest stages. As the judges looked at him with curiosity, one pair of eyes stood out the most. Cemon Cow Well, the judge known for being brutally honest and nearly impossible to impress. Ramon had admired him for years, watching clips on a tiny cracked phone screen. Now, seeing him in real life was both terrifying and inspiring. When Ramon took his first breath and began singing, "Hotel California," something extraordinary happened. His voice, soft yet piercing, didn't just fill the air. It echoed with the story of his life, vibrating with every struggle and every dream he had ever carried. Each note felt like a confession. The nights he stayed up singing outside restaurants for spare coins, the afternoons he practiced while the neighborhood kids laughed at his old guitar, the mornings he woke up hungry but hopeful. His voice held the weight of all those memories, transforming the familiar song into something breathtakingly personal. Audience members, who expected a normal performance, suddenly sat forward, captured by the raw, unfiltered emotion coming from this shy boy from Cebu. Even Cemon Cow Well, who rarely showed emotion so early in a performance, leaned closer with a look of genuine surprise. It was as if he too sensed the depth behind Ramon's trembling voice. There was no flashiness, no expensive outfit, no dramatic backtrack, just a poor boy telling his story through music. And the purity of that moment struck everyone in the room. The judges exchanged looks, the crowd fell silent, and every heartbeat seemed to match the rhythm of Ramon's fragile but powerful singing. His voice didn't just perform the song, it reached into every heart, leaving an unforgettable echo that made it clear. This was no ordinary audition. This was the beginning of something truly life-changing. As Ramon continued singing under the glowing lights of the AGT stage, something powerful began to unfold, something far bigger than just a performance. His voice carried a story, a history, a kind of emotional truth that could only come from a boy who had lived through real hardship in Cebu City. Every lyric of Hotel California seemed to transform into a reflection of his past. The audience didn't just hear a song, they felt the weight of his struggles, the long days when Ramon helped his mother gather plastic bottles to sell, the nights when he practiced on the sidewalk because their tiny house echoed too much, and the fear he lived with that maybe, just maybe, he would never escape the cycle of poverty. But through all of that pain, he kept singing, hoping music would become his bridge to a better future. As his voice grew stronger, the usually energetic studio became strangely quiet, as if everyone collectively understood they were witnessing a moment unlike any other. Ramon's tone had a trembling strength, filled with vulnerability yet layered with courage. It was a sound shaped by hunger, shaped by resilience, shaped by the dreams of a boy who refused to let poverty define his future. Even the camera operators paused, adjusting slowly, wanting to capture every second of this unexpected magic. You could see audience members pressing their hands over their hearts, unable to hide the emotion building inside them. It was rare to hear a voice that felt so honest, so unpolished yet so powerful that it made a world-famous song feel brand new. The judges, who were normally quick to comment or exchange reactions, sat frozen in disbelief. But the most surprising reaction came from Cemon Cow Well, who had earned a reputation for being nearly impossible to impress. His face, usually marked with skepticism or sarcastic amusement, began to soften. His eyebrows lifted slightly, and his posture changed. He leaned forward, elbows on the table, studying Ramon with a focus that told everyone he wasn't just listening. He was feeling the performance. There was no doubt that something in Ramon's voice touched a part of him he rarely let the audience see. For a judge known worldwide for his sharp critiques and stone-cold exterior, that reaction alone spoke louder than words. As Ramon moved into the more intense sections of the song, his voice cracked, not from lack of skill, but from overwhelming emotion. And instead of weakening the performance, it made the moment even more real, more human. It was the kind of authenticity that couldn't be rehearsed, the kind that came straight from the heart. You could almost visualize the streets of Cebu behind him as he sang. The dusty alleys, the tiny food stalls, the old guitar he used to play for strangers who barely noticed him. Now, millions of people were watching, and every note he delivered proved why he belonged on that massive stage. By the time he reached the final chorus, tears were already forming in the eyes of many audience members. It was clear that Ramon didn't just sing the song, he lived it, reshaped it, and poured his entire soul into every second. For the judges, especially Cemon Cow Well, this wasn't a performance to critique. It was a story to witness. And as the final notes drifted through the silent studio, everyone understood that they were experiencing something unforgettable, something that would stay with them long after the applause faded. When the final note of Ramon's performance faded into the stillness of the studio, it felt as though time itself paused to honor the moment. The soft echo of his voice lingered in the air, almost refusing to disappear, as if the universe wanted everyone inside that massive room to fully feel the depth of what they had just witnessed. Ramon slowly lowered his guitar, his hands trembling, not from fear this time, but from the overwhelming release of emotion. For a few long seconds, he stood completely still, unsure if he had done enough, unsure if the world would understand the story he had poured into the music. He looked out into the crowd, expecting polite applause or simple nods, but what he saw instead shook him to his core. The entire audience rose to their feet in a powerful, unified standing ovation. Their cheers erupted with such force that Ramon instinctively stepped back, startled by the wave of energy rushing toward him. Many people were wiping their eyes, others cheering his name, and some pressing their hands to their chests as though trying to steady their hearts. This wasn't just support, it was connection. They weren't applauding talent alone, they were applauding his courage, his journey, his resilience. They were applauding the poor boy from Cebu City, who had walked onto that stage with nothing but hope and left them all breathless. But the moment that truly defined the performance came from the judge everyone feared and respected the most. Cemon Cow Well stood up slowly, his expression transformed in a way that made the entire studio quiet again. It was rare, almost unheard of, for him to reveal any sign of emotional vulnerability, yet here he was, staring at Ramon with eyes that glistened under the stage lights. He clapped his hands firmly, not with his usual controlled professionalism, but with genuine admiration. The camera zoomed in, capturing the rare sight of Cemon's smile, soft, heartfelt, undeniably moved. When he finally spoke, his voice carried a sincerity that made everyone listen. He told Ramon that his performance wasn't just beautiful, it was unforgettable. He said that Ramon's voice had something most singers spent their entire lives trying to find: truth. And then he delivered the words that would echo in the boy's memory forever. "Your voice will echo in people's hearts for the rest of their lives." Ramon's knees almost buckled as tears streamed down his face. It was the kind of validation he had dreamed of for years, but never believed could truly happen. In that moment, everything changed. The hardships of his life in Cebu, the nights of hunger, the years of doubt, the sting of being called just a poor kid with a guitar, all seemed to fade into the background. The world finally saw him, not as a boy from poverty, but as an artist with a story powerful enough to move millions. His performance became more than a song. It became a symbol of hope for every child who felt unseen, unheard, or underestimated. From that day forward, the world remembered Ramon not just for his voice, but for the heart that shaped it, a heart whose echo would never fade.